Greatness does not always announce itself with noise. Sometimes, it enters quietly through discipline, patience, and an unshakable belief that refuses to bend under pressure. Long before stadiums echoed his name, before scorecards carried his numbers, Saeed Ahmed was just a young boy, born on the 1st of October 1937 in Jalandhar, a city still part of undivided India. The world around him was unstable, uncertain, and on the verge of historic change. Partition would soon redraw borders, displace families, and force millions to begin again from nothing. Saeed's family was among those who crossed into the newly formed Pakistan, carrying little more than hope. Settling in Lahore, he grew up in an environment where survival mattered more than dreams. Yet it was here, in narrow streets and dusty grounds, that his relationship with cricket quietly took shape. He was not loud, he was not flashy, but he was observant. While others chased the ball with raw excitement, Saeed studied it. He learned how it bounced, how it moved through the air, how timing could defeat brute force. At Government Islamia College, Lahore, cricket became more than a pastime. It became discipline. Hours of practice sharpened his technique, and slowly, a right-handed batsman with a devastatingly elegant drive began to emerge. Pakistan's cricketing structure was still young, still finding its identity on the global stage. Opportunities were limited, competition was fierce, and mistakes were rarely forgiven. For a young middle-order batsman, survival meant consistency, not brilliance alone. Saeed Ahmed understood this early. When his call finally came, it did not arrive gently. In January 1958, at just 20 years old, Saeed was handed his Test debut, not at home, not in familiar conditions, but in the Caribbean, against a fearsome West Indies side, at Kensington Oval, Barbados. It was the deep end of international cricket. The pressure was immense. The expectations were unforgiving. The bowlers were ruthless. And yet, when Saeed walked to the crease, something extraordinary happened. He did not shrink. He played with composure beyond his years. In the second innings, as Pakistan searched for stability, Saeed Ahmed found himself batting alongside Hanif Mohammad, who would go on to play one of the most iconic innings in cricket history. 337 runs that redefined endurance. Amid that marathon effort, Saeed quietly carved out his own space, scoring 65 crucial runs, stitching together a partnership that anchored Pakistan's innings. It was more than a debut, it was a declaration. By the end of the series, Saeed had amassed 508 runs, announcing himself not as a temporary solution, but as a pillar of Pakistan's batting future. Critics took notice, teammates trusted him, opponents respected him. What followed was the rise of a batsman whose elegance masked his mental steel, a player who would become synonymous with timing, balance, and control. With his debut series behind him, Saeed Ahmed was no longer an experiment. He was now an expectation. Pakistan's middle order, once fragile and inconsistent, had found a new spine. Elegant and dependable. Wherever Saeed walked out to bat, there was a sense of reassurance. He did not rush. He did not chase applause. He built innings the way craftsmen shape art, patiently, deliberately, with precision. What truly set Saeed Ahmed apart was not just the runs he scored, but how he scored them. Bowlers around the world soon learned an uncomfortable truth. Pitching the ball up to Saeed was an invitation to punishment. His drives, both on the front foot and the back foot, were timed so perfectly that fielders often turned around in disbelief, watching the ball race past them, straight down the ground, past mid-off and mid-on. Saeed's bat spoke with authority. He was not a power hitter in the modern sense. There was no brute force, no wild slugging. Instead, there was balance, stillness, and timing so pure that the ball seemed magnetically drawn to the boundary. Series after series, Saeed delivered. 50s became routine. Centuries, when they came, were not hurried. They were substantial, match-shaping innings that shifted momentum. Against arch-rivals India, he produced some of his finest performances, scoring 3 of his 5 Test centuries against them. Innings built under pressure, against hostility, with national pride on the line. By the mid-1960s, Saeed Ahmed had become a senior figure in the team. Younger players looked to him for calm. Selectors trusted him in difficult conditions. And when responsibility grew heavier, leadership was inevitable. In 1968 sampai 69, Saeed Ahmed was appointed captain of Pakistan for a brief period. It was not a glamorous tenure. There were no dramatic victories or famous series wins. Instead, there were 3 hard-fought drawn tests. Matches where restraint mattered more than aggression, where survival was sometimes the wisest strategy. Saeed led the way. He played quietly. But leadership in international cricket is unforgiving. It exposes temperament, it magnifies conflict, and it tests character in moments when silence becomes louder than words. Behind the scenes, Saeed was also battling physical strain. A recurring back injury had begun to trouble him. An invisible opponent that threatened the elegance of his stroke play and the longevity of his career. Still, he played on, contributing not just with the bat but occasionally with his off-spin, breaking partnerships and offering balance to the side. Statistically, his record spoke volumes. By the time he crossed 1,000 test runs, he had done so faster than any Pakistani batsman before him, reaching the milestone in just 20 innings. It was a testament to his consistency, his technique, and his mental resilience. Every great career, no matter how elegant, eventually meets its storm. For Saeed Ahmed, that storm arrived in the early 1970s, on foreign soil, under unforgiving lights. Australia. By this stage, Saeed was no longer just a senior batsman. He was a symbol of Pakistan's classical batting tradition, a man whose calm presence commanded respect. But Australia was different. The pitches were harder, the crowds were louder, and the bowlers were relentless. At the center of it all stood Dennis Lillee, fast, aggressive, intimidating. The confrontation between Saeed Ahmed and Lillee was more than a clash of bat and ball. It was psychological warfare. Words were exchanged. Tempers flared. For once, the usually composed Saeed found himself drawn into a battle beyond technique. Cameras caught it. The media amplified it. The narrative began to shift. In the following test, Saeed declared himself unfit due to a back injury. The same injury that had troubled him before. But this time, doubt crept in. The Pakistan team management grew skeptical. Critics whispered. Headlines questioned his intent. Was the injury real, or was it an escape? The truth was never conclusively established. But in international sport, perception often becomes reality. The management decided to send Saeed home. And just like that, one of Pakistan's most technically gifted batsmen saw his test career end, not with applause, but with uncertainty. It was a brutal moment. Years of consistency, elegance, and service were suddenly overshadowed by controversy. For many players, such an ending would breed bitterness, resentment, a lifelong argument with the past. But Saeed Ahmed chose a different response. Away from the noise of cricket, he returned to a quieter life. He had married Begum Salma Ahmed, a respected businesswoman, and for a time, Saeed stepped into the world of business. Yet even success there failed to fill the void left by cricket's abrupt ending. Then, in 1980, Saeed made a decision that stunned those who knew him. He walked away from everything: cricket, business, public life. Saeed Ahmed joined the Tabligh Jamaat, dedicating himself to preaching, spiritual discipline, and humility. The man who once stood tall in packed stadiums now chose anonymity. The bat that once drove balls past bowlers was replaced by a life of simplicity and faith. There were no press conferences, no farewell matches, no attempts at reclaiming glory, just silence. In a world that measures success by fame and wealth, Saeed Ahmed redefined victory. He did not defend his past. He did not argue his case. He moved forward inward, choosing peace over applause. And perhaps, in that choice, lay his greatest strength. Because legacy is not only about how careers rise, but also about how lives transform after the fall. Time has a way of softening controversy and sharpening truth. As the years passed, Saeed Ahmed's name slowly drifted away from headlines and scorecards. But it never disappeared from the heart of Pakistan cricket. Younger generations may not have watched him play, but they inherited the standards he helped set: discipline, elegance, and dignity. Saeed Ahmed never returned to the spotlight. He did not seek validation through interviews or nostalgia. Instead, he lived a life of quiet purpose, traveling, preaching, and dedicating himself to spiritual growth. To many, this transformation was baffling. To others, it was deeply inspiring, because walking away from fame requires more courage than chasing it. Statistically, his legacy remained undeniable. 41 test matches, 2,991 run, an average of 40.41 in an era dominated by bowlers. 5 test centuries, 3 against India, the fastest Pakistani to reach 1,000 test runs, achieving the milestone in just 20 innings. But numbers alone could never explain Saeed Ahmed. He was remembered for the purity of his stroke play, the way his bat flowed straight and true, the way bowlers hesitated before pitching the ball up to him. He was remembered as a partnership builder, a stabilizer in crisis, a man who made batting look simpler than it ever was. In leadership he was calm rather than commanding. In conflict, he was proud but restrained. And in life, he ultimately chose humility over heroism. On the 20th of March 2024, Saeed Ahmed passed away in Lahore at the age of 86, after a brief illness. The response was not loud, but it was sincere. Tributes flowed quietly, respectfully, just as he had lived. The Pakistan Cricket Board acknowledged his service, honoring him as a former Test captain who had given his heart to the game. Former players remembered his grace. Fans remembered his timing, and many reflected on the rare journey of a man who had experienced both the heights of fame and the peace of renunciation. Saeed Ahmed's story teaches us something profound. Success is not a single moment. It is not defined by applause, and it does not end when the crowd moves on. True greatness is measured by how you carry yourself when the noise fades, when you are left alone with your choices, your values, and your faith. Saeed Ahmed played cricket with class. He faced controversy with silence, and he lived his later life with purpose. That is why his story endures, not because he scored runs, but because he knew when to let go.